Here's what's being reported and what it actually means. Rapper FBG Casino, described in multiple reports as Future's brother, has been taken into custody in a federal case tied to fentanyl. I'm going to walk through what federal charges likely entail, what the next steps are in court, what the stakes look like in cases involving fentanyl, and why you're going to see a lot of careful language while this moves through the system. As always, these are allegations. He's presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. First, the basic frame. When authorities say someone is facing federal charges connected to fentanyl, that typically means the investigation involved federal agencies or crossed thresholds, like alleged distribution, larger quantities, interstate conduct, or a joint task force case with the U.S. Attorney's Office. The process usually starts with a criminal complaint or an indictment. A complaint is the government's sworn affidavit laying out probable cause. An indictment is a formal charging document returned by a grand jury. Either way, the first court stop is an initial appearance before a federal magistrate judge. At that first hearing, a few key things happen. The judge confirms the defendant's identity, advises them of the charges and potential penalties, and makes sure they have a lawyer, either retained counsel or a federal public defender. The court also addresses detention. Prosecutors can move for detention, arguing that the person is a flight risk or a danger to the community. The defense can push for release on conditions, things like third-party custody, travel limits, drug testing, electronic monitoring, or a secured bond. The judge then decides whether the defendant will wait for trial at home under supervision or in custody. Why is fentanyl a big deal in federal court? Because it's potent, deadly in tiny amounts, and the law reflects that. Without getting into speculation on quantities in this particular case, penalties in fentanyl cases scale fast with alleged weight, prior records, and whether the government claims distribution or conspiracy. That's why you'll see the defense pay close attention to lab reports, weight determinations, chain of custody, and how the substance was tested. Small differences on paper can create big differences in exposure. From here, the case moves into discovery and motions. Discovery is where the defense sees the government's evidence, reports, lab results, surveillance summaries, search warrant affidavits, and any recorded statements. Motions are the legal fights over what the jury ultimately gets to hear. Challenges to a traffic stop, a search, a confession, a wiretap, or whether certain prior acts can come in at trial. In a high-profile case, don't be surprised if there are also protective orders limiting what evidence gets released publicly before trial. Let's talk reputation and music for a second. When an artist or someone tied closely to a major artist is charged, the headlines move faster than the facts. Labels and teams will go quiet, not necessarily because there's something to hide, but because public statements can complicate a defense. You may see court dates, but not much commentary. Sponsors and promoters often take a wait-and-see approach until they know whether the case is heading toward a plea, a dismissal, or a trial. What should you watch for next? 4 things. 1. The charging document. If it's a complaint, an indictment may follow with more detail. 2. The detention decision, release with conditions or held pending trial, because that shapes what life looks like for the defendant in the coming months. 3. Any superseding indictment. That's when prosecutors add or refine charges as lab results and grand jury testimony come in. 4. The motion practice, especially suppression motions, because those can determine whether key evidence is in or out. There's also a human side here. Federal cases move on a clock, speedy trial rules, discovery deadlines, motion schedules, and that pressure is real. The defense team will be combing through every minute of video, every lab sheet, every police report to test the government's claims. On the other side, prosecutors have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt with clean evidence and credible witnesses. That's the adversarial system at work. For the culture, cases like this are a reminder of how thin the margin is between momentum and mayhem. Fentanyl isn't just a headline word, it's at the center of a public health crisis. That's why the statutes are stiff, and it's why federal cases draw so much attention. But attention isn't the same as truth. Truth shows up in what's sworn to under oath, in what survives cross-examination, and in what a jury or a judge ultimately decides. If you're new to watching federal cases, prepare for stretches of silence. After the first burst of news, it gets procedural. Status conferences, discovery fights, expert notices, plea negotiations. A large percentage of federal cases resolve by plea, but every case is different, and the defense has the right to push all the way to trial if that's the call. Until there's a resolution, keep the language precise. These are allegations, and the defense will have its say in court. Bottom line, reports say FBG Casino has been taken into federal custody in a fentanyl case. That kicks off a serious process. Initial appearance, potential detention, discovery, motions, and possibly a trial. The stakes are high, the timeline can be long, and the only thing that actually settles it is evidence tested through the system. We'll keep watching the docket and bring you meaningful developments, not rumor loops. Thank you for watching and keeping it locked with real context over clickbait. If you want straight updates with no fluff, like this video, drop your thoughts respectfully in the comments, and subscribe to the Short Clips Podcast. We've got you covered on the next update.